The lake of fire is only found 4 times in the Bible, in Revelation chapters 19 and 20. There is eternal torment with fire and brimstone. Now, staying in Revelation, we can find fire and brimstone, and that can help us to understand this lake of fire. In chapter 14, verse 10, it says, "The same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture," which means without dilution, "into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb." Now this fire and brimstone is associated with the wine of the wrath of God, or his indignation. A few verses later in this same chapter, starting at verse 14, we see 2 harvests. Now the first harvest is the wheat harvest, which Jesus spoke about in the Gospels. The second harvest is the one which gives us the wine. The harvest of the grapes, which are put in the wine press, and then we have the wine that we read about in verse 10, which is associated with the fire and brimstone, which is the lake of fire. So this wine has something to do with the lake of fire. Now we can try to understand what this wine is, where it comes from. Wine comes from the grapes, which come from the vine. Now Jesus said that he was the vine and that we are the branches. And it's the branches that bear the fruit, the grapes. And here it's the grapes that are being harvested. So it seems that the church is here, ready for the harvest, ready for the harvest of the grapes. But what are the grapes? It's the fruit. It's got to do with something from us. I believe the grapes are like our beliefs, what we believe as being our fruit. You might say, well, it's our deeds or something like that as our fruit, but that wouldn't fit. Let's go with the idea of it being our beliefs, our understandings. When they are pressed, it's actually, I think what we end up with, the wine, is our understanding. It's ready. Our understanding is then poured out, which this really means that things weren't understood before because it wasn't time for the harvest before. But now things are ready. We understand, and now it's time to pour out this understanding on those that don't understand. Now let's look at the fire and brimstone in Deuteronomy chapter 29, starting at verse 23. "And that the whole land thereof is brimstone, and salt, and burning, that it is not sown, nor beareth, nor any grass groweth therein, like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah." Of course, Sodom and Gomorrah was overthrown with fire and brimstone. The next verse says, "Even all nations shall say, Wherefore hath the Lord done thus unto this land? What meaneth the heat of this great anger?" So we're going to see what this means, the fire and brimstone. Jumping down to verse 28, it says, "And the Lord rooted them out of their land in anger, and in wrath, and in great indignation, and cast them into another land, as it is this day." So if this was like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, but here we have, rather than utter literal destruction, we have the Lord rooting them out of the land. and casting them into a new land. Now let's try to apply this idea of the Lord rooting the people out of the land and casting them into a new land through the fire and brimstone. In Revelation, going back to Revelation chapters 19 and 20, the land that was overthrown was Babylon. Babylon fell. In chapters 17 and 18, we can see Babylon falling and things concerning her. And now the Lord is, through this fire and brimstone, rooting up his people out of Babylon and casting them into a new land. Well, what is the new land? Right after this, we can see New Jerusalem coming down from heaven. So this fire and brimstone is used to root up the people out of Babylon and cast them into New Jerusalem. In the meantime here, we can also see the marriage supper, and this is part of it. I mean, the marriage supper is a spiritual meal where we feast on scriptures rather than men's doctrines. And through the marriage supper, the bride is made one with Christ. That's what the marriage is about, becoming one. The two become one. So this all seems to fit. And so now let's also consider some other things, other fire or brimstone in the Bible, and see if it still fits. In Malachi, there's a fire that purifies what's good, the silver and the gold, and it burns up the chaff, what's not good. I think that also fits. The fire and brimstone is going to root up the people out of the land. And there's the marriage supper where the two become one. The good, any good doctrines or beliefs are going to survive the fire. They're going to be actually purified. Made more clear, more understood. They'll be purified, tested in the fire, and what's not good, the error, the falsehood, will be burned up. So let's talk about it. Is the lake of fire a place of eternal torment for sinners, as has been taught, or could it be the fire and brimstone where God roots up his people out of the land, Babylon, and casts them into New Jerusalem? The fire that purifies what's good, the doctrines that are good, and burns up what's not good, the chaff, the error. Which way is it?